Brittany, it's a joy to speak with you. Thank you so much for the time.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, thank you.
I love the film. Shadowtown's great. I love Marijuana Conspiracy, actually.
Oh,
I love
thank
that film.
you. Oh
Uh,
my gosh, thank you. I'm so proud of that one.
it's funny because when I was watching it, I'm like, I know her from somewhere. Where have I seen her before? And that's it's such a great film, and this is too.
Thank
It's
you.
a lot of fun.
Thank you
Um,
very much.
what was it that brought you into Shadowtown?
So I actually started working with Jan when I was in my late teens, early 20s to develop the story. He had this idea um, forever ago. He and his wife had been developing it, and he reached out to me and he sort of said, I've seen you in a couple of things. We've met through the Icelandic community. Do you have any interest in potentially doing this? Because you're the only person I can picture as Maya. So I had a really unique opportunity to develop the character with him and to develop the story and give my opinions. Obviously, it was his and his wife's. I didn't write anything, but I did, have opportunities to say, this is something I think maybe we could play with, or I love the direction this is going. So it was really a unique opportunity for me. So I was involved with it for about 7 years before we actually started filming.
Wow. Okay, so this isn't somebody handed you a script and says, "Hey, would you
Yeah.
like to try this?" You were sort of now I understand that, like you said, you didn't write anything, but you were helped
Mhm.
involved in creating Maya and play that out.
Yeah, I was sort of involved in all of the different iterations of the
Mm.
story. It changed a lot from the first draft to the last. It went through a lot of different stages. Maya's job changed, her life changed a little. And yeah, it was really kind of interesting to be able to participate in all of that. And at some point I actually flew out to Iceland about 2 years before we shot so that we could do a couple of test scenes and see how we felt that the relationships were playing between Soli and Maya. And uh, and I went out there and we did some test shots in the graveyard that we used and sort of just tried to come up with a mood and an idea. And Jan started playing with music before we even started shooting, just so we had a sort of tangible concept of what we wanted the film to feel like, more than we wanted it to look like. Beyond anything, it was what we wanted it to feel like. And it was really kind of cool for me to get to be a part of that.
I like that you say there that there's a feel because this film is a mood.
Yeah,
It
more than
really
anything,
is.
that is exactly what I think it is.
Yeah, it really is. There's I want to say this well. It's a very
Mhm.
quiet film in a lot of ways. It's not dialogue heavy. Um,
Cold.
it's cold. Is that
Yeah,
yeah.
that's at least that's how I feel. I think like with the coloring and with the music and like you said with the quiet aspect, it's almost sort of like this hollow cold, like something's missing but in a good way, like not like something, this movie's missing something, don't want it, but like it feels like something's just like not whole, like it's an uncomfortable feeling. And
That
I love that we created that. I was really excited when I felt that when I was watching it.
yeah, I'm glad you said that because the word I was thinking of is like unsettling. Like it's
Yeah.
just you're never comfortable. You're in this beautiful community and yet it's still there's something wrong.
Hmm.
And yeah, it works very well.
I'm so glad. That
Yeah.
makes me so happy.
Well, I wanted to ask you about John Rhys-Davies. I adore him. Like I
Oh gosh,
watched
me too.
Sliders growing up. I watched Indiana Jones films. I'm like, oh, I know.
I know.
How did he get to be involved in the film?
So John and I have actually worked on a number of films together. He is the most remarkable human being. And like you said, Indiana Jones, I was such a fangirl of him. I called him when I was in my early 20s. I was 21 when I first worked with him, which hate to that's 12 years ago, which is insane. um but I remember calling him and just like stuttering because I couldn't figure out how to speak because I was so intimidated by him, and he was by far the biggest star I'd ever been in contact with, and I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. He's Sala, like I don't know how. Um and but yeah, he and I have developed a really beautiful relationship. I love him so much. And when I was working on the script, I said to Jan, there's one person that I think if he comes will be the discerning factor that makes this character everything it needs to be. And I said this once before, but he understands the power of silence in a way that I feel a lot of people don't. Not to say that other actors couldn't do it. Of course, there's a million people who could, but there's something about John and this ability to connect to the sadness, but also the serenity within that. And I just admire him with every ounce of my soul. So when I was reading through the script, I just said to Jan, I said, we have to get him, like, please allow me to send him the script. Please let me ask him. And so I reached out and he immediately said, for you, my darling, yes. And he came and he did like 2 days on this movie. And we had the most incredible time. And it was really fun being able to involve him in something that was a little outside of what people are used to seeing me in, because he was just so incredibly supportive of my diving in and my exploration of what this was going to look like. And he really was part of what gave me the strength to navigate that role.
That's wonderful to hear, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's in it. I don't want to say briefly, because he's not in it briefly. He's
No, I
throughout
mean,
the
his
entire
character is
film.
so, yeah,
But
so trickled through.
yeah, and he carry, like you say, he does silence so well.
Mm-hmm.
It plays so well with this film, because just having him on screen, in those scenes before he has any dialogue, and you can, he again, it fits that mood. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
connects so deeply with the style, and I think he's great. He's so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think his presence in the film is definitely one of the things, in my opinion, that makes it so strong. I think he is the gem of this film, in my opinion. I think his presence really just creates something magical.
Mm, mm, I
Yeah,
appreciate that. And
yeah.
don't sell yourself short, for you two are a gem in this film. So,
Thank you.
um,
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was definitely outside of my comfort zone, but I feel very grateful that I got to explore that and navigate a different role for myself. So it was a real joy.
mm, mm. It shows. It shows everybody was working well together on screen. Um, I wondered for you, the film taps into a certain anxiety of coming home.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, from your perspective, why do you think that carries such a weight with us? This tension of coming home.
You know, I think for everyone it looks slightly different.
Mm,
I think for Maya, it's very much so she's coming home to a place that she's never known, but is the only place that has ever felt like home,
mm,
and home feels um discombobulated. But she connects to a part of herself she's never known by connecting to her grandmother and connecting to a place that created the family dynamic and the life that she's been raised into. I think that there is something in society today, and this is just my belief, I don't know if other people would agree with me, but I think there is this sort of sense of there's like no belonging anymore, in that, like, and I feel it more in North America, and I've mentioned this before, but I really do feel it more, like, having traveled, you know, you go to these European countries and they've got such extensive history. And I've been very lucky to travel to South Africa, and there's a lot of presence of what was. And I feel like that doesn't exist quite the same in North America. There's been so much drive for change and so much drive for development, that there's this sort of lack of being able to connect to what used to be. And as a result, we feel like there's this lack of settling in where we fit. And I've talked to a couple of friends about it, in that, like, I think the wanderlust movement is so saturated by people who have been raised in North America, because there's this feeling of needing to, like, understand and see history and see things that are outside of what we understand. And I don't know if I'm right in that. It's something that I have felt. So for me, that's what it feels like. But I do think there is this sense of, like, understanding. Like, I'm in St. John's right now in Newfoundland. And a lot of people here, there's like a connection to the history. I come here and I feel like I'm home because my mother was born here. My grandmother lived in a tiny little cove with 40 people and raised my mom and her family. And so I feel like I belong here. Whereas, like, I think I don't know. I feel like there's this, like, connection to the past that we all inherently have. And feeling at home is a really daunting thing, because I think it forces us to face perhaps what was. And maybe I'm getting a little too in the weeds of it, but I think there is this, like, lack of belonging, just because it's hard to connect to all of that all at once. Yeah.
First
I
of
don't know.
all, I love the weeds. Let's get into the weeds. I love the weeds. The weeds are great. Um,
I'll just, like, start to spiral, and then I'll start talking about space and how I'm scared because, like, where does the universe end? And it's just
we started in Iceland, and now we're in. No.
and now I don't know. We're in the Milky Way.
No, I think that's a fascinating point what you're saying. I think I it's just got me wondering then, like, because when if I go to Iceland, I think I would feel like a sense of history because I don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting. How do you connect to where you are? And you're right. Like here, North America, there's a real drive for change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, there are still places where that lands, right? Like if I
Yeah.
go to um, now I'm starting to go off in the weeds. So let's sit in the weeds. Um,
Love it. Weeds all day.
I'm like, but if I go somewhere like, well, St. John's or even Washington D.C. or New York City, I feel like I'm part of a vibe. I wonder if
Yeah.
it's the same for the people that live there. I don't know.
Yeah. And that is part of it too, is, like, I do wonder, do you feel connected when you're there, or is it only when you walk away? Or is it that, like, if your great 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 grandmother was born in Wales, do you suddenly go to Wales and be like, I fit here?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's something interesting about that. Because for me, I feel like I fit when I come to St. John's.
Mm.
I love it here. I wouldn't want to live here. It's too cold for me. I can't handle it. But um, I do feel like a sense of home here, which is so weird to me because I've been here like 3 times in my whole life. And I felt the same way in Iceland because my dad's heritage is Icelandic. So I had this, like, oh, yes, this makes sense.
So you felt an instant connection just with the Icelandic culture. Had
Oh,
you
yeah,
been before
I
this trip?
had.
You had.
Yeah, I had. I went once when I was about 16, and then I went back when I was in my 20s. Or I guess I filmed this when I was in my 20s, but um, I'd been back a couple of times, but I don't know, there's just some sort of, like, walking the streets, I feel like I know where I'm going.
Mm.
I don't know what that is. And I feel like people probably experience that everywhere. Like, there's reasons why people will pick up and move to Italy or go to Thailand and be like, yes, this is where I fit. I'm going to stay here. I have a friend from Toronto who's living in Bali. Like, she's been there for years and it's where she feels at home. And I think that's the thing, is we can't always put a finger onto why we feel like we belong somewhere. And that's part of what's a little scary about it, is that, like, you just don't belong until you suddenly feel like you do. And then what do you do with that? Because then you're like, oh, now I feel okay. So what do I do with this? now I'm going to go back to not feeling,
Yeah.
or I don't know. And when it comes to, I don't know, I feel like there's like a million reasons why people could feel it, but I feel like it is probably something that every single person deals with to a certain extent. And there's, even when you look at how culture is in terms of like trying to get the next best thing and trying to get that cool purse or trying to buy those weird red boot shoes that are now apparently a fashion choice. It's about belonging and fitting and fitting in. Like, I think that's something that everybody goes through from childhood through to adulthood. It's about always fitting. And then there's people who never want to, which is also very cool.
Which is its own way of fitting in some
Exactly.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're choosing to not follow, you're fitting with the people who don't. It's like, I don't know. Interesting. Again, weeds, all the weeds.
I love this. This is great. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, we're running out of time. This has been fantastic. Thank you for sitting in the weeds with me.
Of course, my pleasure.
Just as we wrap up, I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what do you hope people take away from their time in Shadowtown?
You know, I think it's one of those films that there's a lot you can take away from. I honestly, beyond what people will take, I hope they'll sit with it. I hope that they'll watch it and they'll be open to what it's exploring and they'll sit with that. Because I think it's one of those films that could challenge people in terms of watching it. They're expecting maybe more violence or a bigger turn or twist or a jump at some point. And I think it would be really cool if people just sat with what the film is and allow it to sink in and allow themselves to feel that cold, empty space. Yeah. And I hope that people love it. Like, I really genuinely hope that people watch it and are moved by it in some way and feel, this is going to sound awful, don't want anybody to feel this way in real life, but I hope there's like a bit of like a resonating, like haunting of it. And haunting not in the negative sense, but that it like for me with this film I watched when I was in high school that stayed with me, is I think we all have like that one song or that one film or that one whatever. I hope that it sort of stays with them and they have moments being like, oh, yeah, and they just like remember a part of it or remember a moment. I hope it stays with people.
I appreciate that. Okay, in all seriousness, no one
Cell
has
phone.
called my home phone in like.
It's your home phone?
That's my
Somebody's
home
haunting
phone.
you.
No one's called me in 10 years on my home phone. This is weird. Anyway, sorry.
It's SHADOWTOWN.
It really is. Brittany, thank you so much. This has been a
Of course, my
joy.
pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Have a great day, and I wish you the
Thank you.
best.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.